Welcome to the Sports Geek Podcast, episode 45. On this week's podcast, I'm going to look at variable pricing. The AFL have brought it in for the 2014 season, and why are fans so confused? I'm going to break it down, and we'll look at the different options they've gone with.
Welcome to the Sports Geek Podcast, the podcast built for the sports digital marketer. And now, here's your host, who knows sports is a 24/7 business, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you're listening to the Sports Geek Podcast. This is episode 45. If you haven't listened before, you can always check out previous episodes at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP, and you can link to either the episode guide and see the previous 44 episodes, and also check out the guests that we've had on the podcast. Not having a guest this week, I'm going to dive into a topic that has been one that's doing the rounds, especially here in Melbourne, but it is one that does span the continents and around the sports world, and that is ticket pricing and variable pricing and dynamic pricing. We've discussed pricing previously with my good mate John Manning on episode 39 of the Sports Geek Podcast. If you ever want to brush up on all things pricing, definitely follow John Manning at SansPrix, P-R-I-X, on Twitter. But listen to episode 39 of the Sports Geek Podcast to listen to more about the pricing strategies. And also our episode 21 where we discussed how the LA Clippers explain variable and dynamic pricing. So why is variable pricing such a big topic at the moment? Well, primarily it's because the AFL has brought in variable pricing. So first of all, I'll get through a bit of a definition, and there will be show notes and there will be a slide presentation. I'm going to add a slideshow to SlideShare for this topic because I think it needed it needed words and pictures. So first of all, a definition of variable pricing. So variable pricing is sometimes called tiered pricing. It allows teams to set, or entertainment venues and comedians and musicians and the like, to set different prices for the same seat depending on the time of day or the time of the game or the popularity of the opponent. And so you set these as before the season begins, and the goal is to drive demand for certain games with low prices and maximise ticket revenue for the high demand games with higher ticket prices. So that's what the AFL has done this season by categorising all the games ahead of the season, by categorising them as a game A, a B, or a C game. And if you look at the slides in the show notes, and that'll be at sportsgeekhq.com/45, this being episode 45, what I've done is I've broken down both the MCG and Etihad Stadium, both being the two stadiums here in Melbourne that support all the Melbourne teams. And so just breaking down the MCG, there's 13 A games, 14 B games, and 16 C games. And you can see there from the slides the leaders in each one and how the categories are broken down and how the different price levels are. So the main difference is that they've created different categories, more categories in the A games. There's up to 7 categories. They've really broken down those upper decks to try to provide cheaper tickets. It's actually quite surprising with the MCG, the cheapest ticket for an adult is $25, and they don't actually have that $25 price point for the B and the C game. So just going through this, I thought that was a little bit strange. So the classifications are, A, B, and C: the high demand match, the medium demand match, and the C match. And so you can see from the slides which teams are getting the A games and the B games. And a quick look at the attendance so far, because what the reports have been, and the media has sort of jumped all over it, is that there has been a large discrepancy or a large drop in attendances. If we just look at some of the key games that have happened at the MCG so far this year, Carlton Richmond normally opened the season to a big crowd, down 18,000. Collingwood Geelong only down 3,500. Essendon Carlton down 19,000. Richmond Collingwood down 19,000. So 19,000 people, and there's 3 games there that have lost almost 60,000 fans, is a big drop. Now, it could be blamed for the ticket prices and the fact that they've gone up. It could be blamed on confusion, and it could be blamed on the late scheduling and those kind of things. But it is something that the AFL will be looking at hard. And I think one of the things that I wanted to sort of point out, because I didn't want to just be this is a stupid thing and they shouldn't have variable pricing. John Manning, one of his key phrases and one of his key rules in pricing is that pricing is a process, not a project. So it will be something that the AFL will have to refine over time. But I think where the flaw potentially is the fact that variable pricing, and to a lesser extent dynamic pricing, and so dynamic pricing, if I give a quick definition of that, dynamic pricing is the pricing that you see for airline tickets, and the fact that ticket price goes up and down depending on the demand and how soon the flight takes off and those kind of things. So there is, if you get your ticket well in advance, you'll get a cheaper ticket. If you buy it at the last minute, you'll pay more. So that's dynamic pricing. But one of the key things that is required for variable pricing to work, and had a really good discussion with some friends on my Facebook feed about this from Australia, New Zealand, and the US, sort of talking about the idea of variable pricing. And variable pricing currently exists in the pro sports in the States, and now bring it into Australia. And if you look at do a Google search for variable pricing affecting attendance, you can see articles related to the AFL this season, and then if you look a couple of years back, there'll be MLB articles and NBA articles. So it's a constant, as John said, a constant process, not necessarily a project. But at the moment, my fear for the AFL is that there isn't the demand. We live in a city that has the MCG, one of the best stadiums for mine in the world, can seat up to 100,000 people. So there's always capacity. There's always capacity for people to walk up on the night and buy a ticket. And now the AFL has spent the last 15 to 20 years moving everybody to becoming members, and that's how a lot of people have now trained their thinking. I'm a member of my team, Collingwood, and I have a reserve seat. All that thing, but there's no real requirement for fans to purchase a ticket, because they know with a stadium that seats 98,000 or thereabouts that there is availability for the ticket. So that's one of the things. Demand is a key thing. You must have that underlying level of demand so you can manipulate the price. And one of the things that John in our conversation was talking about, it's you can manipulate the price around the inventory that you've got, and it's a revenue optimization tool. And that's the thing. It's about maximising revenue for high demand games with the higher ticket prices. And so one of the things that I did find going through the numbers and going through the different price categories for the games at the MCG and Etihad was that the prices only varied from the lower tiers. There was no variance in the Category 1 tickets. The Category 1 tickets at the MCG are $60 for a reserve seat for an adult and $62 for a reserve seat at Etihad for the best seats in the house. Now, those tickets did not go up, whether it was a blockbuster game, Essendon Collingwood Anzac Day, same price as GWS and Richmond, which is a C category game. So that was a little bit strange. The other thing was a little bit strange was that the categories didn't quite match up from a price point of view. So for an A game for the MCG, they had 7 price points, trying to offer a variable price for all the different types of fans. In the lowest band, Category 7, you can get into the game for $25. But that $25 price point isn't available for B and C games. So I thought that was a little bit strange. One of the things that I did talk to with John about, and one of the key tenets he says with pricing rules is moving the price and the value up and down together. And I think that's where currently the AFL hasn't brought the value along with the price. So the price has gone up over the past couple of years, but the value has not lifted along with that price. Now, this isn't meant to be a stadium bashing podcast, but the things that need to lift, and there's been plenty inches of articles written. I saw Eddie Maguire write an editorial piece in the Herald Sun saying that the value and the entertainment value and the access for fans at the stadium and the whole fan experience has to lift if the AFL is going to lift those prices. So the thing is, variable pricing is not a new concept, as I said. It's used in pro sports over in the States. It causes just as much consternation and angst amongst the fans in what they're trying to do. But the thing is, it is a process overall that they have to keep looking at. So the main thing that I fear, and if you look at the slides in the way that the ground has been reconfigured for an A and a B game, I think this is really stark when they had an A game at Etihad Stadium this year, the Bulldogs Richmond, which was supposedly a high demand game, and I was watching the game on TV, and it looked like no one was there. And that's because via the TV you could only see level 1, and the level 1 was quite sparse. And there's a picture a friend of mine took from level 3. Level 3 is chock-a-block. And so what's happened is obviously fans wanting to go to the game didn't want to pay that extra price for that category 2 ticket. And the category 2 ticket is that first level, ground level ticket, and that was $52 for an adult, whereas sitting in the category 4 or category 5 in that top tier was only $36 or $25. So that's a big difference, especially if you're bringing, if there's 2 adults and those kinds of things. Yes, they have family tickets, but what seems to have happened, at least in this game, and this, small sample size and everything, fans have decided, well, that's what I can afford, I'm moving up. So it doesn't look great on TV with an empty lower stadium, but that is going to be something where the process needs to be worked on and seeing exactly what is right for fans. The other thing that is of concern, especially to me as a member, and the AFL has done a terrific job, and the clubs have done a terrific job in signing up fans as members. And this is one where I've spoken to my mum, who's a lifelong Richmond supporter. She's got a general admission ticket, and so that gets her into every Richmond home game. But what has been happening more and more has been this concept of it's now a fully ticketed game. So games have been changed to say it's a high demand game. You have to purchase a ticket, and so that is another thing that's affecting fans in the fact that they have bought a ticket. It's going to get them in, but now they have to pay extra money to upgrade their general admission ticket to a reserve seat ticket. And so as that happens more and more, and if there's more and more of that type of, change of circumstance for the fan, then it might have a detrimental effect on that traditional 11-game general admission ticket. So one of the things that I would be looking at if I was the AFL is making sure that there always is general admission tickets available for fans, even if it is a set amount. But there is a real concern with the ticket prices going up, and it is a worldwide trend. It's not just Australia. Speaking to people around the world, that getting bums on seats, getting fans in the stadium is a constant concern, and there's a concern around the world as people can watch it at home on the TV in the comfort of their home, or in a hotel or in a pub watching it with cheaper beer. So one of the things that gets cluttered in this kind of conversation, and it's very easy to say the crowds are down, it's on the pricing. There's multiple things that affect crowds. Pricing is one of them. The cost of the whole experience, so cost of food at the venue, parking, and those kind of things. When you add all those things up, it does become an expensive day. So there's some of the things that need to be looked at. But one of the things I think, I guess the AFL missed the mark, and the fact that I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks on my radio spots, is they didn't quite inform the fan well enough on why the changes came about and what the prices were and how they were explained. So there was a lot of explanation after the crowds were down about variable pricing, and it is very confusing to fans when they first get started. So have a look at the deck there in the show notes. sportsgeekhq.com/45 breaks down both Etihad and the MCG. So if you're wondering how much it's going to cost for where you're going to sit, you can sort of dive in there and sort of see where there might be some quirky little hacks. Check on different parts of the ground, especially the ones that are moving about depending on what game it is. So if you're on a particular section, it will go up and down depending on where you want to sit for that game. So the main thing is that going to work? Our crowd's going to be down overall for the AFL, and that is of concern. So it's one thing so I'd love to have your feedback. One, what do you think? What are your experiences been in variable pricing? There is talk, again in articles from Darren Birch at the AFL, saying they will be experimenting with dynamic pricing. Again, I think that's a flawed strategy. Without the demand, dynamic pricing works when you have a full stadium and you have more demand than you have supply. And that's the problem they don't have in Melbourne. Now, dynamic pricing may work in stadiums that are full. So it might work down in Geelong where they're getting a full stadium, and might work in Adelaide Oval, and it might work at West Coast and in Western Australia where they've got a full stadium. So that's one thing that they want to be looking at. I was quite surprised that Andrew Demetrio came out and effectively blamed the fans for not showing up. I don't think that's the right approach, but I do think they need to be more sophisticated, because primarily we've got this large membership base, and if they're not showing up, well, where's the value for the fan? And I really look to guys like the San Francisco Giants, who brought in their own ticket reselling platform. If you can't go to a game as an AFL club member, then it's very hard for you to give your ticket to someone else. Now, you've purchased that ticket, whether it be an 11-game reserve seat ticket or an 18-game ticket. So I've got myself as an example. Last year, as you know, I tore my Achilles and I was unable to attend about 6 games in the middle of the season because I was in a moon boot and wasn't able to go to a game. Now, potentially at the end of the season, I could have said, it wasn't worth me going to the games. I didn't go to them all. I didn't get the value for money. And so I think that's something that they really should be looking at and sort of enforcing that's available to all clubs and not just clubs that are at capacity. So we are seeing some teams use that. It's very similar to what the San Francisco Giants did when they decided not to sell mini plans and pretty much kept everyone on full season tickets. And rather than getting people on mini plans, they pretty much said, we're going to provide you an infrastructure to make sure you get the best value you can out of your full season ticket. So Giants fans can quite easily send their tickets to friends, colleagues via the Giants' own ticketing reseller platform. So we've got the West Coast Eagles currently do that. Fans can put it back into the pool, and so can the Essendon Football Club at Etihad, because they've pretty much got a fully ticketed stadium. I think if I was the AFL, I'd be looking at innovations like that to make it more valuable for the member, getting more people in. Yes, it is a loss in revenue potentially because the fan that comes along is not buying a general admission ticket, but it does provide more core value to the fan. Whereas this, unfortunately, is seen as the other way, and it won't stop the fact that there will be those empty seats if these members aren't turning up. So I think there's some of the things. Like I said, a little bit of a different podcast. Look at the show notes for breaking down of how those variable pricing works for the MCG and Etihad. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you've done in the pricing space. Some other good resources, like I've already said. John Manning is an absolute pricing expert, and if you've seen anything that he's done, both in episode 39 of this podcast, and he's also been on Troy Kirby's Tower of Sports a couple of times talking about the pricing process. And so then, like I said at the start, I'm sort of looking at different formats for the Sports Geek podcast, and I'd really love your feedback I'm trying to make it a little bit more lightweight, a little bit less structured, a little bit less rigid, I guess. And one of the main reasons is over the next 5 weeks, I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling. I'll be doing a little bit of work, a little bit of leisure, a little bit of both. But I still want to get this podcast out. So I'll be still mostly focusing on securing interviews. So if you do know anybody in London or Madrid, hopefully we'll be catching up with the guys at Real Madrid when I'm there. Barcelona and Rome is where I'll be heading on my trip. I will be at Digital Sport London on April 22nd. Thanks to Dan McLaren for the invite. So I'm looking forward to catching up with some people from the UK and different sports fields in the sports industry. You can grab a ticket if you are in the UK by going to sportsgeekhq.com/DSLondon, and it'll send you to the Eventbrite site to grab a ticket. So so the next couple of weeks I'll be hopefully putting out a podcast relatively weekly, hopefully with a few interviews. I may pause those interviews and do them when I get back after meeting with people. But yeah, I really want your feedback on what you want for the next year's worth of Sports Geek podcasts, whether it be who you want me to interview, what you want me to cover. Did you like something like this where I dive in to a topic or do a tutorial, that kind of thing? Or do you prefer the short, sharp interviews, diving in, talking to the people at the coalface and what they're trying to do? Like I said, this is your podcast. If you're listening to it, that's the reason I'm building it. I'm building it for you guys and girls, anyone who's listening. I'd just really love to know more about what you're doing. If you go to one of the things that I am doing to sort of help that and getting some feedback is via a survey. If you go to sportsgeekhq.com, let me just check the URL is working, /survey. It's a Sports Geek podcast listener survey. I just want to know, one, what you've listened to, get an idea of what you do as a job function, and then what kind of segments are you looking for and how do you rate the current one. So currently I've got interviews with sports executives, people in the sports IT industry and the sports technology industry, my opinion and news on the latest news and trends, the segments from a radio with Grandstand with Francis Leach and Daniel Harford, are they of use? Social media posts of the week, sounds of the game, closing 2 cents, those kind of things. So I'm sort of freelancing for this episode, so I'd really appreciate your feedback. Give me an idea of where you work, and also what motivates you to listen to an episode. Is it a particular guest? Did you listen to the episode with Josh Tucker because you're a big Dodgers fan and you want to know what's happening with Major League? Or is it really a topic? And if it's a CRM topic, is that why you listen? Also, give me some feedback on the show notes themselves. Is it something you read? Do you go and check them and that's why you listen? I'd really like some feedback on that. And in the other part, I'm also putting it out there, if you want to appear on Sports Geek podcasts, I really want to talk to sports digital marketers, sports business executives that have got a story to tell, got a cool campaign, take us through a case study. If you don't want to nominate yourself, please nominate people that you want to hear from. So that's at sportsgeekhq.com/survey. So that clock ticking, I think I'm going to keep the clock ticking. I like the clock ticking. Tells me that it's time to dedicate this episode and get out of the podcast. This episode has been episode 45. So you can get the show notes at sportsgeekhq.com/45. I haven't done too much research for this. I've been exceptionally busy getting ready for my European holiday. So for 45, I'm going to dedicate this to Michael Jordan, who wore 45 when he was playing baseball and when he came back. So he's going to have the distinction of having 2 podcasts dedicated to him, and he is the greatest of all time, so I'm okay with that. So that wraps up another episode of Sports Geek podcast. My name is Sean Callan, and you can send me a tweet at Sean Callan at any time. Please let me know if you're listening, what your thoughts are, and please, if you can finish up that survey, sportsgeekhq.com/survey. One more thing, coming out tomorrow now. I'll be finishing up this podcast and then finishing up the next podcast. If you haven't listened to Beers, Blokes and Business, which is another podcast that I've been doing, and it's actually been taking up a bit of time as we've queued up 5 episodes for the next 5 weeks. We've had a really special guest. I've spoken about him before. Will Anderson is an Australian comedian, really smart and savvy guy, and we talked to him about the business of comedy and some really good insights into what he does and how he engages his fans and how he uses social media that I think is absolutely tremendous for the sports industry. He spoke at Twitter Brekkie back in 2012 for me and had both everyone laughing and also thinking at the same time. So that will be coming out Monday. If you go to beersblokesbusiness.com to find out how to subscribe, but if you just go beersblokesbusiness.com/iTunes, you can subscribe straight away. And really, there's a few topics in there that might be of interest to you. That's it from me. As I said, I'm going to change up these podcasts over the next couple of weeks while I'm away. Some of them may be shorter, some of them may be longer, some of them may have interviews. But trust me, my plan is to get a few episodes out while I'm in Europe. And additionally, if you're in Europe and you would like to catch up for a coffee or a beer or a wine or whatever you would like, I'd love to catch up with you. And I'm looking forward to catching up with the people I've already got meetings set up with, and bringing you some great content coming from the trip. So that's it from me. Cheers.
Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Listen to Beers, Blokes, and Business at beersblokesbusiness.com. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.